So this year in 2025, the average cost of a family of four on an employer-sponsored healthcare plan is $35,119. And that's just insane. That's not affordable for the employer, it's not affordable for the employee, and it's not even affordable if you split it between the two. In the healthcare perspective, I think we need to realize that
Donovan Ryckis is the CEO of Ethos Benefits and a fierce advocate for employers in the healthcare space. After starting his career in securities, he was asked to help fix a company's benefits problem. What he found was a system built for brokers, not businesses. Today, Donovan helps employers cut costs by up to 40% and design transparent, high-impact benefit plans that work for both the bottom line and the people they serve.
all employers believe this lie that they can't do anything, that they've been incredibly unlucky, and there's just no solutions for healthcare. If we were to send 10 people into the same hospital with the same condition, but give them 10 different insurance cards, they all leave with a different price.
What were some of the things that were really surprising and or shocking to you as you were starting to
so many things. Certainly the misaligned incentives between brokers and employers and how that whole relationship works. Most employers have no idea when, how, or how much their broker consultant gets paid.
What would be one shift that you would hope they could take away and action?
So the biggest part is
Welcome back to another episode of Built for This, Stories of a Maverick, where we explore leadership stories grounded in purpose, impact, and integrity. Today's guest is Donovan Ryckis, founder and CEO of Ethos Benefits, a fiduciary-first disruptor in the employee benefit space. Donovan began his career as a Series 65 fiduciary securities advisor, then pivoted toward healthcare benefits when he spotted dangerous misalignments in employer plans, and built one of America's most transparent and value-driven benefit agencies. Under his leadership, Ethos Benefits has delivered consistent cost savings, eliminated conflicts of interest in broker compensation, and put hundreds of businesses and thousands of employees on healthier, more sustainable plans. Today, we're going to talk about Donovan's journey from retirement planning to making insurance markets to the role of fiduciary ethics in a hyper-complex industry, and why calling the system into question can spark real change. This is a conversation about values, clarity, and what it means to build something better for businesses and their people. Welcome, Donovan.
That was a fantastic introduction. Thank you. I'm impressed by myself.
You got to always have a hype person. I feel like we can introduce you better than somebody else.
It always sounds smarter, when you look retrospectively, and then you think when you're going through it, you're like, I don't know, I was just trying to figure it out.
100%. I was having that conversation with somebody recently about taking time to recognize the little wins that over time are massive wins. And when you're so driven, you just keep going next, and you don't really let it all sink in. So I'm glad I got to create at least one moment for you. Awesome. So with everybody, I'd love to understand a little bit more about how it all started for you. I love a good story of where it's not always what we want to do is what we start out doing. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about how you grew up and sort of how you ended up getting into this.
Sure. Yeah. Kind of a pinball journey, I guess, if you will. I'd say my first project in my early 20s, I actually owned and operated a Gold's Gym. And that was fun, but a little boring for me, to be honest. After the first 2 years and getting the gym up and running and building the membership base, it was the daily activity stuff. So after about 3 or 4 years, I exited as the operator and sold out a couple of years later successfully. So it was a good project. Not the greatest industry anymore. Planet Fitness came in and started disrupting things at that time with $10 memberships, which is insane because it's all right, gym prices had already been the same for 20, 30 years at, $30. And then suddenly we're dealing with this $10 competitor. So after that, I was looking for my next project, right? My next career path or decision on where I wanted to go. And I ended up stumbling upon financial services just as a whole category.
Yeah.
And it always been in the back of my mind. I like problem solving. I like data. And I ended up starting at a financial services company, which is they were doing insurance, and for them that was Medicare insurance and term life insurance and products like that. And that didn't necessarily speak to me, but the industry as a whole did. And it was because I realized I could really work with any type of client that I wanted to, and I could solve any type of problem that I wanted to as I started to figure out the industry, right? I could start to kind of trade up, educate myself more, solve new problems, work with different people. So, being in my mid to late 20s, I started selling Medicare. And let me tell you, 20-year-old telling 65-year-olds about health and like individual health, it was so not me. Like they need and they deserve good advice. It just wasn't my ideal client, right? And I just was not liking it. It was a funny thing because I'm looking at like the compensation model, how you can kind of build an agency and a business out of it. I'm seeing people in the office be successful in kind of this sales process. It's more quantity. You're kind of repeating the same actions over and
Yeah.
over again to build a consistent business. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just didn't really speak with me. The ICP, if you will, being in my early 20s wasn't really working with me. The fact that it wasn't like a consultative sale and it was really like a product based sale, I didn't
Yeah.
like that. Right. So I just kept learning everything I could in the industry, and I started doing different kind of products and sales within my agency that nobody else was doing. And that led to me basically getting my securities license. So I became a financial advisor. And that was during the time, that was about 2015 time. And this rule came out, proposed legislation change, which was the fiduciary rule, which was this idea and this concept that all financial advisors should have to act in the best interest of their clients, disclose their compensation, and not have any conflicts.
Yeah.
And the industry was freaking out.
Which is also very scary when it's like, we want to hold you responsible and do well.
Yeah. So I'm coming in and I'm like, what's the big deal? Like, why are you guys freaking out? Like, isn't that what we do? And you kind of feel like you entered this odd, like Wolf of Wall Street, industry. And I was like, this just doesn't make any sense to me. And the good thing is that there were essentially two paths that you could choose to take, which is one is you could choose to voluntarily take that fiduciary license designation, which would be like a Series 65, or you could go the typical commission-based kind of undisclosed conflicts, all that stuff, like just a bunch of open questions, I guess, when you're working with your clients. So I was pretty sure that nothing would ever come of the legislation. Really, nothing ever did. It got watered down, pushed, delayed, watered down. Nothing really came of it. But I was like, the fiduciary path is really the only way that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Like, I want to sleep at night. I don't want to be tempted to make one decision over another with somebody's life savings for themselves, for their family, because it benefited me. Like, that would just eat me up. So I'm like, let's just do this the right way. Let's license as a fiduciary. And that way, not only do I not have those conflicts or concerns, but I can explain that difference. Right. And also what I realized is that I could pretty much advise in the gap of those conflicts. And what I mean is, when you know how someone's being compensated and they're only being compensated to basically sell a product and move on to the next client, there's a lot of things that don't get done, right? Because they want to get that commission and move on as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So I chose to work with, business owners and entrepreneurs because they had more opportunities with tax structures and different aspects of financial planning that were a little bit more complicated. And I knew if they were working with a commission-based advisor, that advisor would be incentivized to sell the mutual funds or whatever funds they had and just kind of move on, right? Not consider trust planning or tax consequences, or also be well-versed in their, insurance policies, maybe their variable life policies. All that kind of stuff was done. 401ks, pension plans, like all these things kind of combine to create a holistic plan. But if you're not compensated to do so, I mean, why would you? It takes a lot of time. So that's what I did. I went fee-based and I was working with business owners, usually didn't have to be a large business because I was working with them on their personal wealth, but also often their 401k and often creating a pension plan in combination with the 401k. And business was great. I mean, I opted to go out on my own instead of work with a large institution, because when you work with an institution, like any other business, you come into the business, this is how our business operates. Go sell these things. Go do it, right? And that wasn't going to fly with me. The same reason I chose to go the fiduciary route. I was like, this needs to be consultative. We need to be making the right decisions for the right reasons for that individual. And I don't want to have to come in, sell my suite of products because it's what we have. And it's going to put me on the leaderboard. And it's going to give me a bonus and a trip and an incentive and all this stuff. Right. So I went out and did all this on my own, and it was incredible. The cool thing about it was the more compliant I was with this fiduciary concept, the more transparent and honest, and the better I did. And I was like, this is amazing. So, I'm working on my own. I have no office, no employees. And within my first 6 months, I'm already hitting 6 figures a month.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is incredible. I figured out this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And that was great. And I went on with that for basically a couple of years, 2-3 years. And just one day, one of my clients kind of called me, and he's kind of panicking on the phone. And he's basically saying, like, listen, for his 120 employees, he got his healthcare renewal, and it was going to be 37% more. And his publicly traded broker said, this is it. He's got no other options for him, and he's going to have to pay this.
Yeah.
And he's like, can you help me out? And I had no idea if I could or not. So I just said, send me everything that you have. And I said it that way because I had no idea what he would have that I would need. I didn't know.
Problem I'm quite solving, yes. Forgive me everything.
Yeah, send me everything, right? And I was like, I don't know if I can help at all or not, but I did understand that the insurance world doesn't have a fiduciary designation. So the standard of care is suitable recommendations. And if there's an insurance product that's legal to sell in the state, it's suitable for someone to buy. That certainly doesn't mean it's going to be the best option for them. And to me, that's really compounded by every employee that's on the plan, right? Like that's a crazy thought that for potentially like an agent's own profit and ease of time and just all that they would recommend something that's going to have that kind of implication.
And I think it's interesting, sort of a pattern of, I'll call it values misalignment, and then the love of a challenge and problem, and how that can kind of domino whether you're trying to intentionally build a business or not. But you just kind of have to follow like that gut and being in line with integrity and move forward of like, okay, I like this piece, but how X institution does this, I don't love it, or I feel like I'm boxed in a different way. And in terms of, that problem and looking at a way to solve it and seeing what's going on, how did you end up, did you like coming through for the win for him?
Yeah.
And figuring out like, hey, there's a better way to do this, and you're probably going to actually feel much better about it from an employee perspective and a boss perspective?
Yeah. So the most interesting thing when I started, because in securities, obviously there's tons of disclosures, right? Like you can listen to a company's quarterly call, you get their prospectus, you can do anything. You
search up broker numbers, see if they've been in any trouble, and they're still
Yeah.
doing their thing. Yeah.
Everything's out there. There's almost like an excess of information when you're making decisions on that. And what I found most surprising is that everything that he had to send me was almost nothing. So I'm looking at this, right? 120 employees, and I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, all right, 120 employees. There must have been thousands of claims throughout the year, right? We got people going to the pharmacy picking up scripts every month. We got primary and specialists and urgent care and ER visits for not only the employees, but their dependents, their kids, their spouses, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm like, man, there had to be like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 claims over a 12-month period. And what was shocking is that it was all accounted for on one page and in like a paragraph and a half. And it's like, you're going to pay 40% more, basically. So that was weird.
Something's missing.
Yeah. So I was like, that doesn't make a lot of sense, because inherently you're telling this business, hey, you have a problem with claims, costs, right? And I'm not going to tell you what those costs are. Just trust me and pay more. So I went through a process of just basically meeting as many people as I could in the industry to kind of figure out the problems and different ways to attack it, and get some data and get some underwriting done on the individuals and claims. And the end result after about 3 weeks was a 40% differential to the renewal that he'd been presented. So he was presented a plus 37 from where he was at today. Actually came in, -3 from where he was at today. So
Yeah.
not only was he not going to get an increase, he was actually going to save a couple bucks. And we didn't do it any of the traditional ways, which the traditional way is, because this is going up and I gave you no solutions, no data, no remedies to fix this, what we're going to do is we're going to increase the employee's deductible $1,500, and we're going to make them pay more here, here, and here. And we're going to put them in a smaller network, and we're going to raise their premiums out of their paycheck, right? So we didn't have to do any of that. And it was an amazing feeling. I remember getting those results back. I kind of get the proposal back and I see it, and I'm looking at it from a different perspective. I'm looking at it per household, per family, per paycheck for all these employees and individuals in his organization. And that was a different feeling. I really felt something strong about that work that I had done. And I kind of realized, like, I'm working with my ideal client, but I don't think I'm solving their biggest problem. And even though I was in a very lucrative industry and I'm able to operate with no employees and no overhead, and, I basically had some technology overhead, and that was about it, I decided to start making the transition to focus on healthcare. Because it just seemed too big of a problem for me to ignore. If
Yeah.
if you can do that on your first go around, that's not going to be the only case or only example out there, right? Like,
And I'm curious, as you were starting to kind of like do the research and do all the reach outs and have conversations, what were some of the things that were really like surprising and or shocking to you as you were starting to kind of like uncover and learn more about that industry?
I mean, so many things. Certainly the misaligned incentives between brokers and employers and how that whole relationship works. Most employers have no idea when, how, or how much their broker consultant gets paid. And some of it is direct, and you can find some of the compensation. Some of it is indirect, and they're making recommendations because they're pooling all their book of business with this carrier, and they're going to get quarterly and annual bonuses off of it.
Yeah.
So that's a really bad starting point. That's not going to allow you to get a good grasp of the potential options that are out there for you.
Yeah. Already you were not son number one in that equation.
No. And, whatever they do give you is going to look really well compared to the things that they didn't show you and educate you on and explain.
Yeah.
And the other strange thing was, like, the conversation was always the same, was that the problem was the claims, right? The claims incurred during the year. But not only is there no remedies for it, there's no benchmarks. There's just nothing there. It's just like, well, another year of bad luck, right? And they just convinced employers year after year that they're just incredibly unlucky. But the funny thing about it is like, all employers believe this. All employers believe this lie that they can't do anything, that they've been incredibly unlucky, and there's just no solutions for healthcare. And that was incredibly strange, because I think we all know as Americans, like, hospital pricing is pretty much made up, right?
Yeah.
And I say this all the time, like, if we were to send 10 people into the same hospital with the same condition, same age, same sex, everything, but give them 10 different insurance cards, they all leave with a different price. They
Yeah.
pay a different price as the member, and the insurance plan that's tied to the employer would pay a different price as well.
Yeah.
So inherently there needs to be a conversation of benchmarks and where that employer is falling in that spectrum, because the same thing exists for prescriptions and pharmacy, right? So
Yeah.
I think we all understand the costs are variable, but there is never any solution or transparency, explanation, or understanding to help educate, these employers and plan sponsors, like, hey, this is how this works. This is what's going on. It's just, let's transfer this to another insurance company.
And so I imagine it's kind of also too of kind of, I think of like healthcare, especially because there's a lot of profit margins and a lot of money to be had depending on the right partnerships that are made. And, kind of going and peeling those layers back, a little bit of kind of like poking the bear, shall we say, and, trying to like, hey, we're going to do this a little bit differently. So when you made the, decision like, okay, this is a business, I'm going after it. How did you really kind of go about creating Ethos and sort of the core mission of it?
Yeah, it is kind of there is something there, because in a broker relationship, I mean, if just think of how that operates. Like, let's say you have a broker agency, right, in your city, and you have 500 clients, 500 employers. The truth is, you're only getting paid probably by 3 to 5, and that's because your clients are really going to be the insurance carriers.
Yeah.
Because you're getting paid directly from them. You're not getting paid from the clients that you represent.
Yeah.
So what I started to see very quickly was the leverage that those insurance carriers impose on the broker community to fall in line. Do what you need to do. And they do this with carrot and stick. Like they'll incentivize for bonuses. So you need to maintain your book growth and grow it 10% year over year. And then you get this huge, annual bonus. And then also if your groups start to leave, they'll just say, maybe we shouldn't work together anymore. And you're like, what are you talking about? Like, did something go wrong? Is there any complaints, issues, problems? I'm unaware of anything. But they start to see some of their business. They call it theirs, right? The truth is, like, we represent that, and we're supposed to find the best options. So all that was really troublesome, and it's really hard to navigate because you want to tell the employers there's better paths to doing things, but these insurance carriers don't like it, nor do the hospitals, right? They want as much money as possible. The important thing to remember is, like, as a plan sponsor at a company, they have a fiduciary duty to their employees on plan costs and expenses and accounting and managing this prudently. And the health insurance companies and the hospitals have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders. So it's this opposing relationship. So the first step for me was just to strip out commissions and just flip that to a fee basis directly with the employer. So there's back to that conversation of employers not understanding how the broker gets paid. It's in the premium you're paying. That's how, right? You just don't know how much and when is it more and when is it less. So we just subtracted that number from the plan cost. And we said, hey, this is how it's going to work. This is my plan for you. This is the scope of services I'm going to do. Here's some ideas. We could do this over 3 to 5 years. Let's lay out a business plan. And here's going to be my fee. Here's what you've been paying. Here's my fee. And then we can kind of go forth and have an aligned relationship from that point on.
And so when you put this together, and I mean, you already kind of had some relationships starting, but, it's coming from the base of sort of the individual, all fits one in terms of role. And, how quickly for you did you kind of start to kind of build up that team and like, okay, this has got legs, and this is not going to be like me and one other person kind of focusing maybe on, one sector or, one particular niche in the state. How did it kind of expand for you?
Yeah, it's an uphill battle. It really is, because the establishment in the industry is all agencies operate the same. I mean, they're so predictable. It's hilarious. And you could very easily slot in and then just perhaps provide superior support or service, be likable, and get hired and slide into the role that the employer is expecting without having to educate them, without having to go through a different process and an explanation. Like, all that requires extra work. You're having to, we call it the Challenger Sale. It's a great book. It's about kind of challenging your clients and putting them through a better process and teaching them a little bit about your industry so they can succeed. And you're taking yourself out of the traditional experience that they're used to.
Yeah.
But you get a lot of pushback from that at first. Not only are you trying to figure it out yourself, you're trying to figure out this new process, how it might work best, how to explain it best. Some companies hear that and they're like, well, you're a smaller agency than my publicly traded broker. So why are you smarter than them? Right. I
Yeah.
don't get it. This seems different. This is confusing. I don't have time for this. So there is a long, hard road to kind of get through that. And you kind of just get small wins as you go and you keep iterating and suddenly, you're just rolling.
And I love it. So, I mean, it's so funny because I think of entrepreneurs and moving, and usually it's like, I want fast, I want simple, I don't really have a lot of time, but also sometimes what they lack and like not my problem, talk to somebody else is really what it means. And then from an employee retention culture perspective, and then obviously, from a US perspective, benefit coverage, all those things are so important. And I have friends who have all these and it's, as a Canadian is very different. And so I'm like, I'm sorry, what does your plan look like? Like, how do you do that? And like, why are you only allowed to go see those list of doctors? Like, why can't you go see a different one if it doesn't work? It's like, no, it's only covered if I go in like this particular list. And I'm like, this makes no sense. Like, no wonder people are constantly frustrated. Or if an emergency happens, I remember her showing the bill like, oh, and if I had my baby at this hospital instead of this hospital, this is what it would cost. And I was like, this is the most insane thing I have ever seen. So it's surprising to me, to me, it would be like a no-brainer from a founder perspective to really take that to heart, because it would be one of those easy values aligned actions, something to talk about and show that like you consider those things, which a lot of other companies don't. And I'm curious, as you started to learn more, get those pushbacks, realize kind of the fight to get founders time in order to really educate them, as you said, because if it's never really applied to them, they're not really thinking about it. Did that kind of end up connecting in terms of you wanting to make a documentary and, put that on a larger scale? Or sort of how did that sort of kind of come to be as you're in the midst of building a business?
So a few things about kind of that journey in the process. And also my wife is Canadian. She's my partner in the business. And one of the funny things is, so like we actually started working together and partnering up in business before we started dating. And then, we got married a few years ago. But one of the things I was working on with employers with 401ks and pensions is trying to eliminate the risk of like these 401k lawsuits that, were happening all the time. They still happen today, right? Excessive fees, not enough plan choices, maybe the way they did enrollment, right? There's all kinds of reasons these things occur. And when I first saw that first healthcare plan and the 40% differential, I was like, people are looking in the wrong place for employer fraud, waste, and abuse. Because the security side, it's again, you may have a bad 401k, but you can find out really easily. All the information's there. Whereas in healthcare, you couldn't. And that was a drum we were beating for 10 years, saying like, this is going to happen. This is a thing. And kind of going through that education process, like, here's the reason why. And we try to kind of open it up slowly. And for 10 years, we were saying, healthcare lawsuits are coming. They're going to happen. They're going to happen. And January last year, they started finally. It took honestly way too long for people to figure this out, how much waste there is. But that has really also kind of expedited our growth in the past 2 years, because now it's validated. Like I could show them the savings, I could show them how things work, but it's like, no, there's also a significant risk. And there's also a lot of government agencies that will penalize you and fine you for these. You have the IRS, the DOL, the DHS. So there's all kinds of government agencies involved, and these healthcare lawsuits have finally started. So anything we could do to kind of help educate them and take them on that path, whether it's legislation, litigation, proof of concept, benchmarking, and actually getting into the data historically of where they've been and then kind of where it's headed if they don't change anything, like all these different little things we have to use to kind of help create the narrative.
Yeah.
And to your question of like getting founders, involved with this, they want to, but of course, like they're also running an organization and they have a different purpose than just healthcare. So sometimes it's just a bad year and they're like, I get it. I'd love to save money, but I can't deal with another thing thrown into the business this year. Right. And the other difficult part is, in order to make a proper decision and have a good discussion on healthcare, I always say like the company needs to be internally aligned before we externally align with them. Like we're trying to, as an outsider, we're trying to align with them on their goals. But I also need the company internally to get together and be on the same page by having the CEO, the CFO, and human resources kind of come together. And when that happens, those three parties come together at a minimum, they ask better questions. They start getting better results, right? So that's another thing we had to fight and figure out is like, if we brought this conversation just to human resources and they were the only person making the decision, one, it's too much work for just them to do. And then I'm throwing new things at them that they've never heard that sounds scary, right? So that kind of pushed that conversation even more. So a whole host of things to kind of advance the conversation, get a good outcome for the company. And yeah, the documentary has been a great thing as well. So last year we produced a documentary. It's called It's Not Personal, It's Just Healthcare. And it's not us. I mean, I think I'm in it for 30 seconds, just kind of introing the film.
Yeah.
But it is doctors and nurses and attorneys and practice owners, former insurance executives, human resources and CEOs, kind of each explaining their experience of the problem, and then also kind of like a framework and an understanding to get out of it as well.
Yeah. And how did that come to be where like we need to do a documentary about this? Because I mean, going back to founders, like another thing on the list of like, wanting to do. So I imagine, building a business, you're getting traction, but also seeing a need of like, okay, like creatively, I can see the pathway, but also being like, I just like, that's just a lot of work to try to help pull that together on like top of everything else. So kind of, what led to like, we have to do this and I'm willing to make time for it versus like someone else.
Totally accidentally. So one of the good things that we did, just because of how passionate we are about solving this problem and understanding it and staying on top of the market and solutions and things changing, is we've been attending, I'd say 3 to 5 annual conferences a year in our industry, in the healthcare sector, in the broker space, right? And this is to educate ourselves. And then after doing that for 2 to 3 years, and we would learn, go back home, execute those things, iterate on them. So after 2 to 3 years, we realized like we can actually talk now. We can speak now. So for the past 5 or 6 years, we've been speaking at 2 to 3 of these conferences annually. So we kind of built up this network in our industry of all these individuals. So we all kind of pooled together to do it. So alone, I would have never done it or gotten it done. You're absolutely right. But we had this whole kind of industry coming together, trying to pull these solutions, trying to bring it to the employers. And that's basically how it got done. Just being really well integrated in our industry and in our space.
And it feels like when you are intentional kind of with your pauses or, bringing people together, I always am curious kind of the take or outlook, or if it was a learned skill or, somebody kind of had to push to, sometimes you have to pause and kind of hold steady in order to move fast later, where I feel, naturally, of course, every founder, entrepreneur, CEO wants to go faster, faster. They want to grow bigger, bigger, bigger. And, quick is never quick enough. And sort of how did you kind of maybe hold the balance between maybe staying a bit smaller versus kind of, like those other bigger companies, like, oh, we can scale, let me just start dropping people in, knowing that, generally along the way, the bigger you get, if you're not super intentional, the core, the ethos, starts to kind of dilute a little bit depending, and then bringing those right people into the team as well that are super aligned. So how did you kind of think about that from a growth perspective? And maybe, was it an active, okay, I gotta, like, we gotta slow if we want to do this right, so we can attack that problem in the right way?
Yeah, it was super intentional. Fundamentally, we were not okay with breaking shit along the way, which is what happens when you move fast.
Yep.
You break things. And due to the seriousness of kind of what we do and how we feel about the importance of our role and our work, it's personal, right? So it's like, yeah, it'd be great to triple or whatever, this year, but we definitely had a slowdown of 18 to 24 months,
Yep.
I'd say, where we were like, all right, we're going to focus on our processes. We're going to overstaff. We're going to build this stuff out, find the holes, get it documented, right? And it was a mixture of kind of getting some bad people off the bus, within the team that just didn't fit, and then rebuilding, and then having like a different team internally, and then everybody kind of came together. We started to build those processes, and since we've done that in the last 2 years, it's been like hockey stick growth, right?
Yeah.
But now we can do it without breaking things. Like everybody on the team is on the same page. Everything is incredibly well documented, in our Salesforce and our ClickUp processes, all this stuff.
Yep.
And now we've gotten to a point where I feel like we don't even have a B team, right? Like I feel like a lot of companies are like, well, this is my A team,
Yeah.
these are my B players. If I have to push, like we don't even have that.
Yeah.
And it's super intentional, and it's super painful when you're going through it too. Because,
Yeah.
if you're a founder or an entrepreneur, or maybe even like come from a sales background, like, man, you start to get itchy if it's been a month or two and you haven't brought in some new production and your business isn't growing, because you're like, either I suck, my ideas suck, we're not executing this well. Like you just really start to get down on yourself. So it's it's a tough thing to do, but I think it was crucial for us, because what would have been more demoralizing is not retaining our current accounts with how important they are to us.
Yeah.
And also the cost of acquiring a new client, like any business, is so much higher than it is to just make sure you're retaining your existing ones first.
And I always say, what I do is I execute with heart, because it's really important to, have that relationship, that kinship. And then if that goes away, like, sure, you could add more clients, or you could charge more, but why? Like, just to take advantage of somebody to, half-ass the work and not quite do it. And I think when, you're able to surround yourself with that right team, and it is absolutely sometimes a little bit trial and error till you figure out really the personality dynamics and core traits that really work well for you. But when it all comes together, it's super exciting. And I'm curious from a systems and process perspective, looking at platforms, and then obviously, in parallel with healthcare and really AI coming in, and, lots of disruption about to happen. Now, how quickly, larger hospitals and processes are able to implement and speed things up, from like backlogs to specialist appointments. But all these things kind of in flow of like, automate. And I think from, a patient to doctor perspective, from the benefits administrator, sort of how are you either bringing that into how you already operate, or seeing, changes happen systematically, given the industry that you're in?
Yeah, there's use cases all over the place. I mean, we're certainly using it to make our team as efficient as possible. So I try to make sure and check up on my team, make sure they're using some kind of AI at least twice a day
Yeah.
somewhere, because it shortens, we do a lot of, there's a lot of different documents that kind of sync together in a healthcare plan. You need to make sure they're not conflicting. You need to check your contract terms. And this isn't just generalized, kind of open AI. These are AIs that we've trained and say like, hey, here's our 70-page procurement guide for a pharmacy benefit manager. And then if we have a sample agreement, we can upload it in there. It'll redline it. Now we can review it faster, right?
Yeah.
So we try to implement as much of that stuff as possible. And then also on a client basis, things like Notebook LM, like you can upload their whole entire benefit package. And if you have to check something on the fly, you can kind of pull that. And certainly like documenting client conversations and service meetings and requests, like the use cases are just kind of endless. And I was telling one of my team members today, I was like, I am just going to take every Saturday for the first half of the day, and it's just going to be AI. Like,
Yeah.
where else can we implement it? How can we, use it for the team in sales and support and service? Like, how can we implement different things to make it better? Because it's
Yeah.
wild how much you could do.
Yeah, it is one of those things that I think everybody know, like kind of blocks off if it's bare minimum, like an hour a week where they're just playing with a new tool or trying new prompts, or to people having AI coaches. It's like such a fascinating time to see how this is really going to changes how we do everything if you're not necessarily kind of front line to that, if you have a completely different type of role. So in terms of, you look forward and, your vision for Ethos, for healthcare, like what do you see? What are you kind of committed to kind of creating as you look forward?
So the biggest kind of part of our platform this past year and then going into the next couple of years has really been education. So I am flying around the country to just speak on educating companies in this wherever I can, whether that's different national healthcare coalitions, like the SHRM annual conference state events, different organizations I'm part of, like the Exit Planning Institute, where we do a lot of work with companies that are working on M&A activity. With healthcare being a top 3 expense, it's really important to get that figured out. So
Yeah.
everything that we do now is geared towards just putting a good, solid, free education out there with no pitches, because
Yeah.
inherently we're going to be telling them stuff that they're not going to be hearing, and they're going to come back to us with more questions.
Yeah.
And that's enough. We can kind of lead with value, give them something that they can take away, consider, ask, and then kind of come back to us. And that's been working extremely well. And it's expensive, and it's exhausting to fly to all these states and
Yeah.
do. And sometimes you don't hear from those people for a year or two, and then now it's starting to happen. But that's really the thing I'm most excited about. So we have some organizations where we're teaching like 4-hour classes. We're hosting webinar master classes on concepts like healthcare fiduciary frameworks, and I've just really been trying to leverage other organizations where I can bring value to them as much as possible. And that's been the biggest part of our growth. And I think it will continue to be.
I love that. And then from, a company perspective or size, have you kind of noticed the trends in terms of like sizes of companies that are kind of ready to make that shift or that you're fitting in really well with? Or is it kind of like, what, we've got the mom and pop shop to like the 120 to 10,000, or sort of where have you kind of landed in terms of that?
Yeah. So our minimum nowadays is usually 250 employees and up. That's kind of the minimum. And the interesting thing is, you would think as a company gets bigger that their benefits are inherently better or more sophisticated, more complicated. There's more decision making, better processes, and it's often not the case. So yeah, I mean, the bigger the organization, the better we can help more individual people. So 250 is kind of the low side, up to like 7,000 currently, but certainly above it. I mean, it's the same thing, just bigger numbers, and it works out in their favor when we do it too. So
For sure. And I'm curious from an equity perspective, when you're talking about bigger companies and, people thinking they have better benefits, I always look at like bigger companies. I know the executives do. I don't know about everybody else. So I'm curious in terms of, you're being able to kind of talk about value of like also bringing in like everybody kind of needs to be getting fully taken care of versus like 10 people in that organization getting that top tier private healthcare.
yeah, I mean, for most companies, honestly, it's usually the same. There are certainly some healthcare packages.
Yeah.
Usually it's just built into their compensation to where they don't care if there's a
Yeah.
$5,000 deductible to somebody at the top is meaningless.
Yeah.
But for a lot of other people, they don't even have it in their bank account, right?
Yeah.
So we're certainly employing as many strategies as possible to correct that as quickly as possible, and then also focus on the everyday costs when they actually use it to make sure we can get those costs down, because that's all we have to do. Like, what we're doing is not asking the employees to do different things to not have medical conditions. What we're doing is working on the supply chain of those costs behind the scenes. So, the typical mistake is employers are asking their employees to do stuff for them for the healthcare plan costs. And it's like, no, as the employer, you're the leveraged buyer, and you can make those decisions to make healthcare better for them.
And if you could kind of give one takeaway or maybe, data that you kind of come to for any, founder or, maybe another executive listening that's like, okay, I want to bring this forward as something we really need to come together and work on because how we're doing things is not working. What would be kind of, one shift that you would hope they could take away and action?
So many things. I mean, one of the interesting, so this year in 2025, the average cost of a family of four on an employer sponsored healthcare plan is $35,119. And that's just insane.
Yeah.
Like, that's not affordable for the employer. It's not affordable for the employee. And it's not even affordable if you split it between the two. So we've kind of just reached a breaking point with it. So one of the things I like to give people is like either an opening or a closing thought to really just kind of start to question and keep this in your mind and ask better questions when you get to it, is a really old quote from a British theorist, Madison Beer. And the quote is, "The purpose of a system is what it does." So therefore, you can't say the purpose of a system is something that it repeatedly fails to do. So in the healthcare perspective, I think we need to realize that the purpose of our insurance carrier is not to keep our healthcare costs low, because they've utterly failed to do that over the past 20 years. So we need to quit thinking it's their role and their purpose and their job to keep healthcare costs low. Same for maybe our broker or consultant. If that hasn't delivered, it's time to rethink it. Either they're failing every single year, or the system is maybe just not designed the way we thought. It's not broken. It was designed this way. So it's maybe time to just kind of ask better questions, start with that internal alignment inside the company, and then use that to start asking better questions to get that external alignment, because the employers have the fiduciary responsibility. The broker does not, right?
Yeah.
So trying to get that connected there to where the person that's navigating you through this complicated ecosystem is also on your side. You can go far with that. Just kind of creating that alignment.
And sort of to kind of, round out today's conversation, I'd love to kind of move into kind of rapid fire questions. I would love to know kind of one principle you always return to when you're facing an unfair system.
If you can't follow the rules, change them.
Love it. What's one myth about employee benefits you'd like to debunk?
Absolutely. The easiest and simplest one is that you can do nothing to control the cost of healthcare.
How do you stay true to your values while scaling?
I always just, everything is wrapped around our first value, which is be a fiduciary first. So start with that and then position the rest after.
Love it. What's a moment that reminds you why this work matters?
Every single time we get results and I get to see it on an employee basis, and I'll literally look and be like, oh, this person has 2 kids, this person has 3 kids, and I get to see that reflection in a per paycheck amount. Totally worth it.
Love it. And last question, in your own words, define what built for this means to you.
I think, again, maybe I said it a few times, but alignment, right? Like if you have that alignment within yourself, it's built for you. You can sustain it. It's going to keep you energized, motivated, and it'll work for your clients, right? The more kind of compliant you are with that, the better you'll do.
Love it. And for people who are super interested in terms of the way that you're working with companies, founders, the education process, what is the best way to reach out to connect in with you and your team?
Yeah, I'd say LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, Donovan Ryckis, Ethos Benefits, and then also check out the website for the documentary. I promise if you get in and watch the first 5 minutes, you'll be sucked in, and it'll either really inspire you to make change or really piss you off. But either way, you're probably gonna act on something.
I love that. Well, I appreciate you. It was so great to learn more about what you do, how you got here, and Ethos in its entirety and what it's up to. I love a company that's got a mission and impact, so I appreciate you taking time.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenna.
Thanks.